Hello and a warm welcome to episode 18, Uranus in the Zodiac Signs. Today, in this episode, we'll be talking about your Uranus sign, what it means, what Uranus represents in your horoscope, where it was positioned at your birth, and how you can find it in your horoscope. Uranus, like Neptune and Pluto, is considered one of the modern planets. Because in ancient astrology, all three of these planets were still unknown. Uranus was only discovered in 1781, and Neptune and Pluto even later, in 1846 and 1930 respectively. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are also often referred to as transpersonal or transcendental planets because, among other things, they go beyond the familiar, beyond what can be experienced, beyond the material. Yes, but what does that actually mean? To explain this, let's briefly take a look at a celestial chart, something similar to what I have here behind me, just in a digital version. I'll just bring that up for a moment now. For this, we'll first take a look at the 7 main ancient celestial bodies. The 7 ancient planets, which we've already covered so far, all of them in the previous episodes. Specifically, we're talking about the Sun, which is positioned here in the middle. Here, in this case, is Mercury, which is the next one, and by the way, it only takes 3 months to orbit the Sun. Next comes Venus. Here we have the Earth, but in astrology, we use the Moon and Mars instead. These 5 main celestial bodies, often referred to as the 5 planets, even though it's clear that the Sun and the Moon aren't actually planets, have traditionally been referred to as the inner planets. Break time equals 0.5s/ since ancient astrology. These planets, or rather these celestial bodies, are considered the fast ones. The Sun, of course, is always in the center, but the others, all of them, take up to a maximum of 2 years. So, Mars takes about 2 years to complete one orbit around the Sun, and Mercury, as mentioned, about 3 months. And these inner planets, also called personal planets, influence how we think, how we feel, how we act, how we love, and how we express ourselves. These are influences that are relatively easy to observe, and they also include the first 5 phases, which will be starting soon. So, phases 1 to 5 are precisely about these inner planets, these personal planets, which we then track every day to see how they affect us. Yes, and that influences our personality, our daily life, our consciousness, and generally, our earthly experiences. And now let's take a look at the outer planets, which were already known as the outer planets back then. Namely, there's Jupiter, or what are also called the slow planets, because, for example, Jupiter takes 12 years to complete one orbit around the Sun, and Saturn takes about 29 years for one orbit around the Sun. And that's why they're called the slow planets, or also the outer or impersonal planets. In general, they have a deeper and longer-lasting effect, more related to life cycles, fate, but also societal issues or spiritual development. Among other things, they teach us maturity, growth, and learning from experience. Yes, and now we also have our transpersonal planets, the modern ones, which were only discovered much later and which you can't see here on this digital sky chart because they weren't yet known in ancient astrology. And they also weren't properly incorporated into the ancient system. But I've already covered that in another video, specifically in episode 7, The Origin of Astrology, where I explained it in detail. The video is also linked below, in the description, for anyone interested in why it hasn't been properly incorporated today. And that's exactly why they're not included in this color system, in this complementary system. But of course, we still take them into account because they definitely influence us. This means that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto have not been assigned a color. Up to now, we've assigned different colors to the 7 ancient main planets, namely the 7 colors of the rainbow. Here, this is how they've been represented so far. These would be our 7 ancient main planets here, with the 7 different colors. And the 3 new planets, which were only discovered much later, are now represented like this. Namely, the P for Pluto, the N for Neptune, and the U for Uranus. Because the next 3 episodes will focus precisely on that. They concern the 3 transpersonal planets, and today it's all about the Uranus. In the next episode, it will be about Neptune, and in the one after that, about Pluto. And that's exactly why we're now using these white planets with the labels, with the letters for each respective planet. And that's exactly how we're using them now, and we can also see how they influence us, without in any way disrupting the old, ancient, beautiful, geometric, mathematical system. And by the way, the celestial chart from just now, this one here, that's also in the book. 1001 Miles Wants to Become a Buddha is included in the first volume, along with many other colourful illustrations. Exactly, and it's all about the first 2 phases, about the moon and about Venus. And if you'd like to purchase it, you'll find the link to the book below in the description. Right, break time equals 0.5s/, but let's get back to our question. What exactly is a transpersonal or a transcendental planet? What does that actually mean? Transcendental comes from the Latin transcendere and means to climb over, to cross. Break time equals 0.5s/, so it essentially describes something that goes beyond the normal limits of thinking or of everyday, conscious, but above all, controllable experience in daily life. Break time equals 0.5s/. Yes, but specifically, what exactly does that actually mean? In order to be able to utilize the powers of Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto in a fully controlled and conscious way, you must already have fully transformed your energetic frequency, as well as your energetic pattern, so to speak. Break time equals 0.5s/. In other words, you would have to have already attained a Buddha-like state. Or, as others call it, being enlightened or having already been in nirvana, essentially representing an enlightened person, which is nothing other than someone who has, in the end, worked on themselves and has raised their energetic frequency, their level, to a new level, yes, and has, so to speak, purified themselves, transformed all their shadow aspects, and then you can begin to use these powers, these supernatural abilities. These are also the phases that might potentially come up or occur at some point in the future, which, at this particular moment, aren't really necessary right now, because we wouldn't actually be able to consciously use these powers yet anyway. That means you can only use them if you have already completed your work, if you have already thoroughly purified all of your shadow aspects. And in our particular case, that would only be after the Saturn phase, because right after phase 7, if you want to go even further, you could add phases 8, 9, and 10. Break time equals 0.5s/. And then you could dedicate yourself even more specifically to these supernatural abilities, which is of course also extremely interesting. And of course, these abilities can already begin to start to show through even now, even if you are not yet fully enlightened. Break time equals 0.5s/. That's exactly what is often uncontrollable and, for some people, can even come through quite strongly and noticeably, depending on how these planets are positioned within the horoscope and how they are intricately connected to each other. or, of course, to other planets as well. And there are people who are very much aware of these supernatural abilities. For example, these could be abilities associated with Uranus, where it's about electricity, mental abilities, flashes of inspiration, and genius. Yes, these can of course come through. The only problem here is that you cannot hold on to it. You cannot really complete it. You might get flashes of inspiration, break time equals 0.5s/. You might receive insights, but you cannot really express them because something is simply still missing. What's missing is the necessary awareness, the required energetic coherence. And with Neptune, of course, it could be clairvoyant abilities, dream interpretation, also insights, but more on an emotional basis. So, you could also say that Neptune is about higher feeling, higher seeing, or even seeing, having foresight. You can already see in advance what will happen, whereas Uranus can be described as the higher intellect. And precisely such supernatural abilities can be difficult or even impossible to maintain if you haven't purified your shadow aspects beforehand. You can see this quite clearly, for example with dream exercises, when the natural guardian appears, where fear then arises, panic attacks. There are some people who try to practice astral travel or do dream exercises, training themselves in that area. But at some point, you reach a stage where you realize you can't go any further. There's fear, there's panic. Yes, those are the natural guardians, you simply can't get past them. You can't move forward because you first have to sort out your own issues here before you can, so to speak, enter into these supernatural, magical abilities or be initiated into them, or gain full access to them. Of course, they do seep through, but then it's chaotic, unstable, uncontrolled. Yes, and Pluto could be described as the higher instinct, the higher bodily perception, because Pluto is often associated with energy. That means people with a strong Pluto influence, if they have their channel truly open, so to speak, they could achieve incredible results in energy work, in healing, in shifting energies, because that's Pluto's strength. Here, it's all about going deep. You could also say, with Uranus it's about going upwards, with Neptune it's about going outwards, and with Pluto it's about going deep. And it's precisely these planets that can seem particularly tricky to us in everyday life, even when we want to consciously control them. That will actually be the case in the long run. They become the toughest nuts to crack because they're the hardest to grasp. They're also the most distant planets because before we had Saturn, which came after Jupiter, so the outer planets. And Uranus is then even further out. After Saturn, it's even further out and takes even longer to orbit the Sun. Then comes Neptune, which is even further out and takes even longer to orbit the Sun. And after that comes Pluto, which is the very outermost, so extremely far away. And it takes a whole 248 years to orbit the Sun once. In our phases, however, we naturally include these 3 planets as well. So we observe them too. That means we will become familiar with them. We will know how they influence us. Of course, we will tune in and see for ourselves exactly when and how they are also connected with other planets so that we can observe these influences in ourselves as well as possible. Yes, and now it's all about Uranus, where it is in your horoscope and what it can mean there. And Neptune and Pluto, we'll take a closer look at those two in the next 2 episodes. This here is the new Uranus list, and if you haven't already received it by email, you'll find the link below in the description. Yes, You can click on it there and you'll be taken to where you can find it. You can download it, as well as all the others that have been released so far, so all the other planet lists. And in addition, you'll also find the address for the additional meanings below in the description. I've made a page on my website where you'll find loads more meanings for Uranus, but also for all the other planets that have been released so far. Yes, I've added them there so the selection is even bigger. And ideally, you'll already find something that fits you now, exactly, where you can say, okay, that suits me. Yes, you should make a note of that, circle it, remember it, because we'll need it later. Phase 1. Because towards the end of the preparation phase, so before phase 1, there will be blank lists again. I'll make those available again. Send them by email if you've already signed up for the newsletter, or also on my website, so that you can download them. Exactly, so that you can transfer everything you've observed so far onto a new, clean, blank list. Exactly, so that everything is nicely organized for phase 1. But I'll explain that again at the end, once we've gone through all 10 planets. Right, so this is now the Uranus list. The symbol up here, that's the symbol for Uranus, and Uranus stands, among other things, for electricity, flashes of inspiration, the sudden realizations, genius, but also inspiration or breakthroughs in general. Now let's look at the horoscope to see where we can find Uranus here. If you don't have your horoscope yet, you'll also find the link in the video description below to the video on how to create a horoscope. I explain it there. I do it together with you. In just a few minutes, it shows you how you can have your own personal, individual birth chart created. Please do that and then come back here, because you'll need it now so you know where to find Uranus in it. Right, now let's have a look at mine, where Uranus is in my example horoscope. And here, it would be in Libra. I'm just circling it with the mouse right now. But we're starting with Aries now, because we always start with Aries when we go through the zodiac. That means, if this symbol, so, the Uranus symbol is in Aries, this is the symbol I'm circling with the mouse right now, then your Uranus sign is Aries. Break time equals 0.5s/, and that means that Uranus was in the red direction of Aries at the time of your birth. Break time equals 0.5s/. And on the bright side, this can mean courage for radical changes, sudden flashes of inspiration, maximum breakthrough power, liberation. Yes, those are the classic examples, people who can change their entire lives in no time at all, just like that. When they realize something isn't working anymore, they don't need anything for that. They do it overnight. Aries, with Aries Mars energy. Yes, extreme changes are possible here in no time at all, where others might need a lifetime because they keep weighing things up, hesitating, and aren't sure of themselves. And on the shadow side, extreme, sudden outbursts of anger, even rage. Unpredictable aggression. Yes, that's really a nasty business, and I can speak from experience here, because I myself have Uranus in a square, so in a high tension aspect, not in Aries, but I did have a phase where I had Mars in a square, the Aries Mars. Mars is, after all, influenced by Aries, coloured by the Aries direction. And yes, someone in the village hit my car's wing mirror. Yes, and I chased after them because they didn't stop. They just kept on driving. And I impulsively drove after them, shouting like a madwoman, honking like crazy. And because they didn't stop, they basically drove me up the wall, made me absolutely furious. I followed them through the whole village, shouting, wildly, shouting and honking, until we ended up in front of his house. Yes, He just came up to me and said, "Well, I should mention, I live in Sicily, in southern Italy." He then came up to me and said, "Young lady, you're lucky you didn't pick the wrong person here, because otherwise..." I said, "Well, yes, but you did hit my wing mirror." Well, in a way, he was right. That was Uranus in all his glory. He just appears, like a bolt of lightning. He strikes, and if you don't know about it, you pretty much don't stand a chance. These are also the classic examples, highly aggressive people who can't control it and end up tyrannizing their families. Or tyrannizing other people. Or at work, yes, or whoever has to deal with such people, it's a disaster. Yes, if you don't know about this and just let it run its course. Yes, because it just strikes, and it's incredibly hard to really grasp. But if you do know, then you can start to observe it. And that's exactly what I started to do, because at some point I realized what was going on. And I also observed that every time there are such connections, or when the moon is involved, when it was in square, that this trigger was even stronger, that something here would trigger me. And then you can systematically go on a sort of hunt, a self-hunt, a Uranus self-hunt. When does it happen? How does it happen? And that too is a process, because that's why it's called transpersonal. It's so tricky and so sudden and, well, you really need a certain amount of time before you can actually grasp it. Because even when you know it, it hits you so quickly. It gets triggered so fast, and of course it doesn't happen the next day, but rather, yes, you have to keep observing and be ready. When it comes, it takes longer. The phases or time get shorter and shorter. Soon, you can do it in just 10 seconds. Oh, hang on, okay, I'm about to lose it or I'm in the middle of it, and so it keeps getting shorter and shorter, until eventually you reach the point where you catch it in the moment. And when you have it in the moment, this Uranus energy, then everything changes. Because then you can finally use this highly potent energy for what you can actually use it for effectively and, above all, constructively. You can then do whatever you want with it. It's extremely potent and full of energy, and it's no longer just wasted pointlessly. In some kind of... Yes, wasted on some kind of freak-out action. Right, let's continue with Taurus. This is the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if your Uranus symbol is here, in this area, in this 30-degree section, then your Uranus sign is Taurus. And that means that Uranus was in the green Taurus section at the time of your birth. In the green Taurus direction in the sky. And that can mean, on the bright side, material insights, calm, steady change. Yes, so here it's actually very positive. If it's well placed here, then Taurus, the calm Taurus, gives the impulsive Uranus a more tranquil touch. Yes, that can have a very calming effect and be very positive here. On the shadow side, however, there's an extreme aversion to movement. Yes, that would be exactly because Taurus is naturally calmer anyway. And if Uranus is somehow blocked here, then that could make things even calmer, even more sluggish, because it then swings to the opposite side. Yes, and then we might have someone who is extremely overweight, really unsporty, yes, sluggish when it comes to movement, it could manifest like that. Exactly, and unstable finances, because Taurus also stands for values and finances. Exactly, and then Uranus here, if it is well positioned, if it is especially favorable, can really have a positive effect here. Break time equals 0.5s/, but if it is badly positioned, everything Taurus has painstakingly accumulated over time could be gone in no time at all. Let's continue with Gemini. This is the symbol that I am currently circling with the mouse pointer right now, and if your Uranus symbol is here, in this particular section of the chart, break time equals 0.5s/. Then your Uranus sign is Gemini. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the orange section of Gemini. And this can manifest in the following ways. In brilliance of thought, lightning-fast comprehension, flashes of inspiration. Yes, Gemini is already an intellectual sign anyway. And then, combined with Uranus, which stands for higher intellect among other things. And if this is well placed here, then we're talking about a little genius. Without a doubt. On the shadow side, however, there's a separation between feeling and intellect, because there's very little emotion, if any at all. Because if, for example, there are no other aspects or planets present that bring in emotion, such as the Moon or Venus, break time equals 0.5s/. If, let's say, there's little to nothing there, no relevant aspects, no significant placements, or perhaps even a square or opposition, then you could really have a very emotionally cold person here, if not someone completely cut off from their feelings, meaning their emotions are lived entirely separately from themselves, with absolutely no connection to them. Yes, that's how it could manifest. Or, on the other hand, sensory overload due to the sheer number of thoughts and electrical impulses. The nerves are flooded, overstimulated, because so much is coming in. Let's continue with Cancer. Cancer is the symbol here, which I'm circling with the mouse. And if the Uranus symbol is in here, then your Uranus sign is Cancer. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the direction of Cancer in the sky, in the dark blue direction of Cancer. And this can manifest in the positive form as sudden intuitive insights. Exactly, because Cancer is, of course, emotional, and here this can blend with intuition. Exactly, and that can have a very positive effect. Because here, feeling connects with higher intellect and can, of course, bring about some really great things. Mental clarity about feelings, also very useful. Of course, because Cancer deals with the whole spectrum of emotions, it can grasp that very well indeed. Reflecting on it intellectually, and thus having a much greater understanding of one's own emotional world. Electric sensitivity. Yes, that's another aspect that comes into play here. Exactly, because people with a strong Uranus influence can be very electric anyway, but also perceive electricity very easily. And if this is then combined with the emotional Cancer, it can result in extremely heightened sensitivity. On the shadow side, however, yes, there can be very extreme mood swings. Yes, if those are already present on the shadow side in Cancer, together with Uranus, with the lightning, good luck with that. In the worst case, you end up with a completely different emotional person in front of you every 5 minutes. Yes, it can get very extreme. Running away from intimacy, exactly, emotional explosions. Let's continue with Leo. Leo is the symbol here, where I'm currently moving the mouse around. And if the Uranus symbol is located in this area, specifically in this 30-degree section, then your Uranus sign is Leo. Break time equals 0.5s/, and that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was positioned in the direction of Leo in the sky. The 12 zodiac signs are, in the end, nothing more than our 12 directions in the sky. And Leo is one of these 12 directions in the sky. And that's exactly where Uranus was at the time of your birth. And that can mean, in its most positive form, a brilliantly creative expression, because Leo is already creative by nature. And then, with Uranus, with the brilliant Uranus, something truly extraordinary can happen. Brilliant creativity emerges. A self-assured way of being different. Electric zest for life. Yes, these are the ones who walk into a room and, exactly, immediately electrify everyone. Everyone is instantly captivated by those Leos who take center stage, especially when connected with Uranus in action. Yes, exactly. Yes, and on the shadow side, however, there's overheated energy. Over-identification with being a genius. So, you can end up feeling excessively brilliant, and that can lead to ego problems or just feeling far too great about yourself. And that can actually be damaging to your development because you stop judging yourself objectively and put yourself on too high a pedestal. Or an overstimulated ego. Then let's move on to Virgo. The symbol for Virgo is this one here, which I'm tracing with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is located right here, in this specific area of the chart, then your Uranus sign is Virgo. Break time equals 0.5s/. That means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the section of the sky that belongs to Virgo. And that in turn means, among other things, in its positive form, the body as an antenna. Uranus amplifies the sensory aspect in Virgo here. Because when Uranus falls in Virgo and is also well positioned there, it electrifies precisely that. This physical and mental center of perception, yes, and this can manifest itself as sudden knowledge about the body, spontaneous healing impulses, intuitive diagnoses, or even a kind of bioelectrical sense for the subtle flows of energy. Break time equals 0.5s/. Yes, and right here, that would make for an exceptional doctor if you have this position in your chart. Break time equals 0.5s/. Then, of course, you will indeed be aware of this ability in yourself. And if you put even more focus, attention, and dedicated effort into this process, it could truly make for a real, almost miraculous healer, because here, in this context, healing also happens through the power of consciousness and awareness, since Virgo is not only analytical but also possesses a sharp, discerning mind. Yes, and with Uranus also in the mix, exactly, you have an innovative, original, and sharp mind at work, constantly thinking outside the box. This would be the perfect doctor, the ideal medical professional, for spectacular, almost unbelievable miracle healings, or even for intuitive, creative, and unconventional approaches to medicine and healing. Exactly. On the shadow side, however, there's critical nervousness, nerves, no spontaneity, because Uranus stands for spontaneity. And if that isn't favored here, or is perhaps even blocked in combination with Virgo, then it can result in a complete lack of spontaneity, or physical restlessness. Break time equals 0.5s/. Let's continue with Libra. Libra is the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is in here, then your Uranus sign is Libra. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was positioned in the green Libra direction. And that means, among other things, in its positive aspect, social intelligence, brilliant diplomacy, love at first sight, yes, that really is the case here, falling in love at first glance. And not just once, either. Depending on how Uranus is positioned in Libra, you might find yourself falling in love over and over again. That can happen quite often, yes, and artistic originality. On the shadow side, however, there can be a fear of commitment due to a strong desire for freedom, because Uranus also stands for freedom and independence, or sudden breakups. Let's continue with Scorpio. Scorpio is the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is in here, then your Uranus sign is Scorpio. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the red direction of Scorpio. And in its positive form, this means, among other things, an original, investigative intelligence and a scanner-like eye for the truth. Yes, you definitely can't pull the wool over their eyes. But that's not all. Uranus in Scorpio is one of the most intense and profoundly significant Uranus positions of all. Here, electric renewal meets deep emotional and psychological depths. Break time equals 0.5s/. The result is an energy that can radically destroy the old in order to give birth to something entirely new on a much deeper level of consciousness. Break time equals 0.5s/. Uranus in Scorpio stands, among other things, for sudden renewal from the depths. Yes, and on the shadow side, among other things, sudden, uncontrolled emotional outbursts. Yes, the Scorpio feels very deeply and intensely, but often hides those feelings. Yes, so they generally do not like to show them. Break time equals 0.5s/, and if Uranus is badly placed here, then everything can suddenly boil over from one second to the next. With a strike, like a lightning bolt, yes, all those suppressed feelings, or perhaps not always suppressed, but certainly hidden, come out. Then let's continue with Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is here, then it's a Uranus in Sagittarius sign. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the light blue Sagittarius direction. And that can, among other things, mean being visionary and progressive, a creative teacher, a revolutionary thinker. On the shadow side, however, it can mean being a fanatical free spirit or experiencing sudden upheavals in life. Alright, now on to Capricorn. This is the symbol I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is here, then it's a Uranus in Capricorn sign. And that means that at the time of your birth, Uranus was in the Capricorn direction, in the violet Capricorn direction. And that can mean, among other things, in its positive form, long-term visionary planning, an innovator within tradition and structure. Yes, especially in long-established structures that have perhaps existed for centuries, then someone comes along who has Uranus in Capricorn, and they really manage to bring about change here. So, in a situation where a large number of people have believed in something for many years and have been completely rigid about it, someone like this can come along. Break time equals 0.5s/, and truly change everything. On the shadow side, however, there is a very cold distance, ice cold. Yes, really, really cold, so much so that it gives you chills. That's when you need your winter down jacket. Frustration due to slow progress. Then let's continue with Aquarius. Aquarius is the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol appears here, it means your Uranus sign is Aquarius. And that means that Uranus was in the violet Aquarius direction at the time of your birth. In its positive form, this means, among other things, brilliant flashes of inspiration. Yes, that's definitely a real genius, because Uranus is at home in Aquarius. Break time equals 0.5s/, and if it's well placed here, yes, that's definitely a very brilliant person. Eccentric originality. Yes, they'll stand out. They're just completely different, but incredibly intelligent and, yes, simply a truly eccentric person, then. Yes, but original in a positive way. Revolutionary vision. On the shadow side, however, extreme cold-bloodedness. Yes, similar to Capricorn. Here then, yes, that really is. Could manifest without batting an eyelid. Break time equals 0.5s/. If you have something like that in your own chart and you notice it, then maybe, okay, I really am quite cold, like, when it comes to feelings. It's not really my thing, Yes, maybe, exactly. You could have a look at that, because you do need feelings as well. One should definitely feel something. Yes, that's just one of those things you should work on, you know. Break time equals 0.5s/. Then, that you can do it too, if you have cut yourself off in that way, or if you simply feel less by nature, because it's not always the case that you feel little just because you're blocked or have gone through traumas. Some people, exactly, just naturally have fewer emotional influences, and so you simply feel less, and that's completely normal. But yes, you should try to train yourself in that as well. Break time equals 0.5s/, but we'll be covering that in phase 1 anyway, and we'll go into it in more detail then. Of course, that's also for those who feel less, because in phase 1 and phase 2, it's more about feelings, and naturally, the intellectual types will find that more difficult. Yes, it will be more challenging for them. Whereas, when we get to Mercury in phase 3, where it's more about intellect, all the intellectuals will, of course, really enjoy themselves here, whereas perhaps a deeply emotional Cancer or Pisces, well, yes, that's just not really my thing then. But to be complete and whole, to truly become whole, you need all the parts. Break time equals 0.5s/. At the very least, you have to acquire them to a certain extent, if you're missing something. Yes, and then there's also arrogant eccentricity. Yes, and now, last but not least, our Pisces. And that's the symbol here, the one I'm circling with the mouse right now. And if the Uranus symbol is in here, in this area, then your Uranus sign is Pisces. And that means that, at the exact time of your birth, Uranus was situated in the light blue Pisces direction. In its luminous form, this can manifest as deep spiritual revelations. Yes, Pisces is a dreamer anyway, and already has a very strong and natural connection to intuitive things. Break time equals 0.5s/. But if Uranus joins in here as well, which stands more for intellect, for the mind, you can imagine that it complements each other perfectly. For example, into an intuitive knowledge. It then doesn't remain just an intuition or a hunch, but becomes concrete knowledge for which you can also find expression and words. You draw original ideas from dreams. Electrical sensitivity. And, of course, the more conscious and aware you become, the more you actively work on your energetic structure. The clearer and more vivid these ideas become, the more easily you can draw them from your dreams. Break time equals 0.5s/. Or revelations in general. And what about the negative side? Hypersensitivity, emotional chaos, illusory genius. Yes, when you start to think of yourself as a genius, but unfortunately, everything is chaotic and there's no common thread. You're stuck in it and actually don't understand anything yourself, or no one else understands anything either. Yes, but you're so caught up in your own self-image that you think it's brilliant. So, we've now looked at Uranus in the zodiac signs. Just to get to know it, we've gone through all of them. In the next episode, we'll be talking about Neptune in the zodiac signs. And then we'll take a look at what that's all about, shall we? In all zodiac signs, or rather, in your own zodiac sign. Alright, see you in the next episode. Take care until then. Bye bye.